Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to be my review of the latest Summon Showcase. It's another Gala remix, this time around featuring the return of Gala Elisanne at an appearance rate up. She's joined by two brand new adventurers. Let's take a look at those now. First up, we have the Traitor Apostle himself, Basileus, making his debut as a Wind Wand. Obviously, he plays a prominent role in the Faith Forsaken event. Cool to see him playable, a character I wanted to be summonable, and now he's going to be as of tomorrow. Alongside him, the other new adventurer here was kind of a surprise. She is a water healer, Sandalphon. So canonically, Sandalphon is a dragon. She is an angel who is the central dispatch of the 5 archangels and 5 apostles in the Northern Church of Grams. Of course, she has a prominent role in the event as well, but it's cool to see her make an appearance as a playable adventurer, since we don't often get dragons that are playable in that way. Usually in Dragalia Lost, dragons are treated more like equipment. You attach them to your adventurers, who are the primary characters you control in battle, and you get to shapeshift into your dragon every now and then, but a lot of times their main purpose is just for the abilities that they confer passively onto the character they're equipped to. In this case, they've chosen to implement Sandalphon not as a dragon, but as a full playable character, which I think is kind of sweet. It's like Mim or Tiki, some of the other famous dragons in Dragalia Lost, and in Fire Emblem, I guess, in Tiki's case, that get that full playable treatment. So excited to take a look at both of their kits. They are kind of wordy, but I will start off just sort of by summarizing my thoughts on this showcase in case that's what you're most interested in. So of course, we still have our free daily tenfold summon, so let's start there. You should do those summons before investing any more resources into this showcase. So the duration is not long. It starts on the 15th, ends on the 18th in my time zones. It's a short and sweet showcase, so I think you should get, 3 free daily tenfolds on this one, 3 cracks at it. Maybe you'll get some of these characters or even all of them. And after that is when you want to make your real summoning decision about whether or not you should go any further. On the 18th, or 17th even in my case, we're going to get a preview of the next banner that'll come after this, and that can also help inform your decision here about whether or not you'd want to save resources for that potentially or spend them now. I don't think we're going to get our Halloween banner just yet, but we do know Halloween Silas is coming at some point. He was teased in the Dragalia Digest, and I would have to imagine at some point we're probably going to see a playable, well, maybe not playable, we're probably going to see Uriel as a dragon, right? Maybe not playable since Sandalphon is, but the other archangels so far have not been. I would also imagine that we're going to see Michael at some point, Basileus's archangel, but other than that, I'm not totally sure. So I'm not sure what else we have for the rest of the month. It could be a filler banner as well, but you'll know more if you wait till the end of this window to do your summoning. The other thing that I want to mention is, I do think this is a good showcase. So if you've been waiting out on the Regina showcase and we're considering summoning on that, at a glance, my first impression on this showcase is that this is a better value compared to the Regina showcase. That one was a prize banner. You do get a chance at prizes with every pull that you do, but ultimately Regina is the only thing at an appearance rate up there, and it's 4% appearance rates for 5 stars. With this being a Gala remix, you get a 6% base appearance rate instead, so you're more likely to just get valuable summons, even if it's just in terms of your Eldwater value. But moreover, I genuinely think Basileus and Sandalphon both look really good. And one of the things I said about Regina was she seems okay, she seems totally fine, powerful even, against current content if unessential. But the thing that made me most curious and intrigued about Regina, and why I think you might want to go for her, was really about the future, and it was mostly as pertains to Surtur, our final boss of the Sinister Dominion that releases toward the end of this month. Well, my thought at the time was Regina might have some interesting special applications against Surtur. Maybe that's the reason to go for her, because we really don't know a lot about that yet. Maybe it has some affliction mechanics, or her defense amps would play a role and be helpful, her ability to cleanse afflictions would be helpful. Well, as it turns out, Sandalphon kind of does a lot of that same stuff. And in my opinion, looking at her kit, probably does it even better than Regina. So if the reason to go for Regina was about autoing Surtur or having an easier time against Surtur, well, frankly, I think Sandalphon is going to do that even better than Regina. So for me, this is like a clear preferable showcase to the showcase that just ended. We did have 10 free daily 10-folds on the past showcase, so hopefully you were able to pick up Regina along the way, but if not, for now, I wouldn't necessarily sweat it. I do think Sandalphon just looks overall better. Different type of unit, she is a healer, whereas Regina is a DPS, but looking at her kit, it looks very complete with a lot of the same things that made Regina so special. And in fact, it looks like Sandalphon even pushes those to a greater degree that could make her difficult to replace once Surtur comes out, depending on the nature of the mechanics of that fight. So overall, I do think this is a better showcase than the previous one. Basileus and Sandalphon both look very strong. Gala Elisanne is still a solid adventurer, and she does have access to a mana spiral through the Trials of the Mighty. I think this is a good one. I think this is actually a pretty good one if you have some resources left over and are interested in powering up your wind team or your water team, and the latter in preparation for Surtur, the former for Iblis, Yaldabaoth, or Legend Ciela. So to talk a little bit about Basileus, since I spent some time on Sandalphon, he just seems to be very complete. It looks like he's going to have high damage. He also has a lot of really good utility effects. He has overdamage in his kit. He has Dispel in his kit. He has Stormlash in his kit. And he has defense reduction even. He has a lot going for him to where he can be very versatile no matter the fight you're up against. And I think that he stacks up well against all of the current wind endgame, which compared to water, we don't know what boss our water adventurers are going to face. We don't know what Surtur is really going to be like yet. For wind adventurers, that's not the case. We have Iblis, we have Yaldabaoth, we have Legend Ciela. All that content is already released. So for me, Basileus is even more of a clear, powerful adventurer, and one who can actually fulfill some roles that are sort of hard to fill depending on who you've summoned in the past. So we'll get into all of that in this video. Now we're going to spend the rest of the video going through the kits and breaking everything down here. But my overall take is, yes, this is a showcase, but even besides your free daily 10-folds, that I could definitely see it being worth summoning further on. So let's start off by looking at Basileus, the Apostle, who shall administer her authority, with Michael in the background, of course. He is an attack unit, and there's a lot to read through here, but I think I'll focus mostly on the essentials as opposed to just reading out some of the damage or the details on the effects. His first skill is called Ventus Impalement, and you're going to see right off the bat, there's 2 different or even 3 different modes that Basileus operates in. Before his sigil is released, he's going to have a little aura around him, a little circle around him. If enemies are within that circle, then he's in close quarters combat mode. If enemies are outside of his little radius, then he's in ranged combat mode. And depending on the mode he's in, his skill effects differ. So when he is in close quarters combat, Ventus Impalement deals damage to surrounding enemies, lowers their strength, and grants the user a defense amp. However, if he's in ranged combat attacking from afar, instead it deals damage to the target he's attacking and nearby enemies and inflicts Stormlash. So already you see some of the versatility here. This could either provide a defense amp, which is immune to Curse of Nihility, strength reduction, again, debuffs on the enemy boss are not affected by Nihility, so that could also work in Iblis, or you could cause Stormlash, which on the Master difficulty in particular, Stormlash is an essential affliction to have against Iblis, and it's still fairly rare. It's Cecile, Saiga, Formal Joachim, Valentine's Chelsea. There's not a lot of adventures that cause Stormlash, and if you missed Humanoid Midgard Stormer, who is the best free source, the only real free source of Stormlash, you don't have a lot of options at your disposal for an essential affliction in that fight. Now, Wedding Aoi did just get Stormlash, and she was already a fantastic DPS adventurer to begin with. Unfortunately, her abilities just didn't stack up super well in general because you can't sleep that many enemies, but she had very high modifiers. So she's an adventurer now that, if you're missing Stormlash, maybe you have her, you kind of have your bases covered, but still the versatility here strikes me as quite strong. Now, once Basileus' sigil is released, you get all of the above. You don't have to choose between close quarters and ranged. It deals damage to surrounding enemies, reduces strength, Stormlash, and you get a defense amp, so all the better, right? So let's move on from that to the second skill, Spirit of Sanction. This one's shareable at a cost of 6. So if you're in close quarters mode, it deals damage to enemies directly ahead, dispels 1 buff from each target, and creates a debuff zone around the user that reduces the defense of enemies inside it. Nice. If you're in ranged combat, once again, it's just dealing damage and causing Stormlash. And if your sigil is released, well, you're going to deal damage around you, you're going to dispel, you're going to get the defense reduction, and you're going to get the Stormlash. So as before with the first skill, it's all of the above. And if you look here, the shared skill SP cost is high, but it is the sigil released version. So even though it's expensive, if you do share this, it is a Stormlash opportunity. It is defense reduction, it's dispel, and it deals some damage. So it is a pretty complete shared skill in that sense. You're getting multiple effects out of it, not necessarily at the best rate as far as SP cost, but it does cover a lot of ground. So I think this is super interesting. I like that they've leaned into close quarters versus ranged combat as the playstyle here, something we haven't really seen with any of the other apostles, and it feels fitting for Basileus to be this powerful. When I look here at the co-ability and chain co-ability, it's pretty basic, but this co-ability of skill damage plus 15% is valuable, and for co-op content, there's still generally a de facto best choice in the wind element of Dragalia Zanfried, because Dragalia Zanfried's chain co-ability is Dragon's Claws. That boosts your strength, it's really good, but it doesn't work in Curse of Nihility. So for Curse of Nihility content, this is a pretty good adventure to bring. Boost your skill damage, it's not a bad option. I think more important for solo content, you are getting that skill damage boost on your entire team just by including this adventure. So reading on, abilities here, we have Michael's Covenant 2. At the start of quest, you get your Lock Sigil for 300 seconds, and you get a unique Force Strike that deals damage to multiple targets and enemies near those targets, and has 3 charge levels. The number of enemies this Force Strike targets increases based on how many levels are charged. So even that is kind of interesting, right? Because when you think back to Legend Ciela, it may be a while since you've played it, or maybe you've never taken it on, there are certain enemies, they're called raptors, they look like birds, but there are enemies in that fight that have a shield which has to be force striked through before they can be dealt damage. So the fact that you can target multiple of them at once with one force strike, it's actually a really decent fit, in my opinion, for that particular segment of that battle. I think that's actually kind of interesting here. And similarly, we'll move on in just a second to one of the other abilities, but Legend Ciela, if you'll remember, also has some hit count checks where you have to deal a certain number of hits within a time limit. Well, Basileus is already a wand, pretty good at hit count mechanics, and he's going to have another passive ability with overdamage that even helps that further. So I just really like how Basileus lines up here. Now, when you think about Yaldabaoth even, right? Master difficulty, phase 2 of Yaldabaoth, you bring wind units. Yaldabaoth's whole gimmick is you have to deal with lots of enemies. You can't let them survive until their timer ticks down. If you let enough of them tick down to 0, Yaldabaoth unleashes a screen wipe run-ending move. Well, the fact that this can hit multiple enemies, it gives Michael, Basileus, the ability to go AoE on your enemies as well, which is something that you see in adventures like Grimnir or Meganaut, for example, but is also kind of valuable in that fight. So it just seems like on every dimension that is sort of required in endgame content for Wind Adventurers, Basileus has an option that's just like perfect or well suited in some way for that content. So moving on from the first paragraph of this long ability, also creates a combat zone around the user and grants the user one of 2 combat styles, close quarters or ranged. This is just explaining how that works. So if there are any enemies within the combat zone, the user will engage in close quarters combat, otherwise they default to range. Interestingly though, they do say here, The standard attack patterns and effects activated by the first and second skills will change based on their combat style, so even your standard attacks change. Lock Sigil's remaining time is reduced by 15 seconds for every 25 hit combo. After activating, it won't activate again for 8 seconds. I think it's going to be very easy for Basileus to reduce his Lock Sigil compared to some other adventures, and of course in the Sinister Dominion, in the second phase of Master, for Yaldabaoth specifically, since that's where you'd use a win team, your sigil comes auto-unlocked. So just like in the current raid event, your sigil is automatically going to be released with apostle characters you use in phase 2, so you don't have to worry about that. When the lock sigil wears off, the user is granted sigil release. It removes the combat zone and combat styles and grants them a unique force strike with 1 charge level. This is the same as the user's force strike at level 3 during lock sigil. So you get that powered up force strike, but it charges even faster because it's just 1 level. And the user's standard attack patterns change, so likely get a little bit of an upgrade there. And the user's first and second skills will activate different effects, and we read through those effects, so you can kind of get a sense for how Basileus plays in all 3 sort of different styles: close combat, ranged, or sigil release. Finally, he has Bog Res 100%, and the last thing I really wanted to highlight here was the 15 hits equals over damage. We haven't seen this too often where you can get over damage through an ability like this, but here we go. For every 15 hit combo grants over damage based on 30% of the user's strength. It won't stack, and it's removed when the combo counter resets. So you could probably have essentially full uptime on this. You may have to dodge, you may have to avoid a little bit, but if his combos are anything like a normal wand, at least the ranged one, you can really get to a 15 hit combo very easily. And then once you have a combo, over damage is kind of just like passive ticks of damage that contribute toward your hit count and are based on your strength over time. So once you get this going, it's going to be even easier to maintain a combo. I just think Basileus looks really great. You know, with Iblis, you do need some Stormlash. For Master, it's essential. For Expert, it's helpful but not essential. And you do need a little bit of Dispel, or at least it's desirable. There are certain mechanics where I think there's one buff Iblis gets in particular when you're trying to lure a bat into a typhoon, and that has to be dispelled. Other than that, there are just some passive buffs that Iblis will get that are good to dispel but not essential. Another curiosity here to think about is Basileus seems excellent for manual play because you can choose which of these things that you want happening. For autoplay, I'm not so sure. The auto pathing of the AI is, it requires some study. That's the best way I could put it. The AI always seems to take sort of the path of least distance to accomplish its means, and rarely makes superfluous movements unless it gets caught in like a decision loop where there's 2 conflicting AoEs and it can't dodge both of them. So for example, a ranged AI will usually just start attacking a boss as soon as it gets close enough that it can lock on an attack. It doesn't actually walk up to the boss. So this is a reason that, you know, you may put Ronzel's shared skill on a ranged AI, but in autoplay, they end up never using it because unless mechanics force them to walk closer to the boss, they'll just stand there and they'll just attack, and they won't necessarily intentionally get any closer. So I could see this working out in different ways. You know, for Basileus, there are certain attacks that Iblis does, as one example, where you move to the edges of the arena that would probably push you to be ranged. But there are also attacks that Iblis will do that bring you in close. So for example, after Iblis frostbites one unit with a large purple circle, then the outside of the arena is a purple ring and everybody comes in close. So I think through a normal auto run of Iblis, there are going to be organically situations that come up where Basileus is going to run through both modes. I don't think he'd be reliably in close quarters enough that you could count on this defense amp hitting a max team level of 2 with just him, but I do think that you're sometimes going to get the close quarters mode, but you would probably more often get the ranged mode if I had to guess. There are just more attacks where you tend to move outward, and even when ranged characters move in, they usually just move in to avoid AoEs or just to get sort of close enough to attack. There's some other attacks in that fight, like the overlapping circles, where Basileus might either move inward or outward. There's points where you're attacking the bats in a circle, and if you're attacking those from the center, when Iblis respawns in the center, if Basileus was standing there already, then he might go into melee mode. But yeah, it's a lot to consider when it comes to AI play. I think most people aren't trying to auto Legend Ciela, but Master Ciela and below, it's probably well known by now, but I should say for that, Ronzel, Lowen, Templar Hope, you have all the basics covered at low rarity, and you could easily fill that last slot with just your Harl that you got for free, so I wouldn't even consider Basileus for that, even if he's probably very capable of doing it. I think it's more the endgame content that you're looking at, and I'm curious. I mean, I'm not sure what his behavior would exactly be like. There are good, very good, like 99 or 100 out of 100 methods to auto Iblis already established, and I don't necessarily see Basileus shining in that regard. I think his power is more just the versatility his kit provides. Like, if you're struggling with any of this content in a manual sense or in a co-op sense, he's going to cover a lot of the essential functionality that you need. He is a Sturmlash enabler for Master Iblis. He can hit a lot of enemies at once for Master Yaldabaoth. For Legend Ciela, he has a high hit count with overdamage. He also can 4-strike through a lot of enemies at once, which are both relevant for that fight. He also has Dispel, which is relevant in all of these fights, and he's a Stormlash enabler, Stormlash Punisher enabler as well, just in general for DPS. Really, really good adventure here, and one that I'm excited to see added to the game. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time just on Basileus, wow. Let's go ahead and move on to Sandalphon, because a lot to talk about here too. So she says she'll administer her authority with wings that connect the heavens, and like the portrait here, we do get the Heavenly Wings version in the background, and it almost looks like she's kind of wielding a lasso in her hands, but I suppose it's all connected. Oh, and we got a crash! We'll reopen. But I was going to say, I suppose it's all connected to kind of like her intercom that she uses as a dispatch. It's funny, I never get crashes when I'm playing. It's only when I'm on the menu screens or summoning. But in-game, I'm good. But, I guess that's a sign the video has gone on for a while. Alright, so we'll proceed with haste here. Sandalphon might just be the best water healer in the game. So I was trying to think about this going into this video. You have Ricard, you have Nurse Eileen, Jiangxia, and Dragalia Lily. And then finally you have Thaniel. And I think clearly Thaniel, past his prime, was once the best water healer against Hilda back in the day. But he's clearly out of the equation. Ricard, really good welfare healer. Actually can do a lot with the ability to cleanse burn and provide regen. Kind of an underrated healer, but he doesn't have amps. He doesn't have overdamage. He doesn't have max HP buffs. He doesn't have any of the fancy stuff that you get at higher rarities. So I think he's probably out of the equation, but a healer I like a lot. Jiangxia, she was kind of like the upgrade to Thaniel back in the day. Wow, a 5-star water healer that can cleanse burn and can give regen in addition to a defense buff on her second skill. And she has a pretty nice chain co ability for regen at low HP. All of those things sort of equated to, this is basically what Thaniel would have been like if he ever managed to get a mana spiral, which sadly he did not. And so she's fine. She's still a very good healer. She's the first healer I cleared Master Lilith with. And that's a fight that I have seen some players struggle with the Creeping Corrosion in Phase 2. Obviously, you don't need a healer for Master Lilith, but most players are going to want to use a healer for that portion of the fight because of Creeping Corrosion. And so I think Jiangxia is still a very good healer and totally fine. But again, she's a little bit Agito generation, if you will. Like, she doesn't have anything special against Curse of Nihility. Her defense buff is not going to work there, so that's one thing against her. No max HP buffs, no amps, no overdamage. And then you get to Dragalia Lily and Nurse Eileen. Now, Nurse Eileen's Spiral is available through Trials of the Mighty, and I don't recommend using an Omnicide on her, primarily because she's just a 4-star, and I think a big savings of the Omnicide is the Champion's Testaments that you save. Those are relatively precious, so I'd lean toward Omniciding a 5-star and one that you have almost no investment in. But if you have been playing and organically building up your Nurse Eileen through Trials of the Mighty, she actually has a very, very good mana spiral. So it gives her access to amps, but not overdamage. She does have the ability to cleanse stun, and she can slowly boost max HP through, I believe, her second heal that cleanses stun in an AoE around her. She's a very solid healer. She also has a Dragon's Haste Chain Co ability, which is a pretty offensive Chain Co ability for a staff, and synergizes well in the water element with some Dragon Transformation characters, or just other characters that randomly have Dragon's Haste. So you have it on Tiki, you have it on Urius. I guess they're both, unique transformation characters, but Dragon's Haste is available. It's a thing in the water element that you can make happen. There's some good dragon forms to shapeshift into, or in certain content you could also go with the GNC spam. But Nurse Eileen is way up there. Personally, I tend to use Dragalia Lily. I use her for Legend Twins. I used her for for Master Lilith. It was a little close in both of those, I must admit. And I think the biggest weakness with Dragalia Lily, I said the biggest and now I'm listing out things, right? But let me start with the biggest weakness. I think it's the fact that her animations are just bad. So it takes her a really long time to do anything. And in both Legend Twins and Master Lilith, the AI has to reposition a lot. And for that reason, one of her special moves, abilities technically, that Lily has, is she throws a present on somebody and heals them and gives them more max HP. Well, throwing that present takes forever to do, and so if you're constantly dodging purple and red attacks from the twins, or even from Lilith, you're moving around the sweet circle, that move and Lily trying to use it often gets her kills. And the other thing I was going to say when I started listing out, Lily doesn't have regen. She does boost her own strength by a lot. She has a ton of overdamage, so she can provide a huge overdamage tick to your team. But she's really kind of like a DPS healer and not the safest choice. So I think a lot of players I've seen out there, they like to use Nurse Eileen. It's comfortable, you don't have to stress. You get a healer, but you get some buffs that still work. Nurse Eileen, notably her defense and strength buffs don't work in Nihility, whereas Lily's personal strength buffs do work in Nihility. So Lily's a pretty good healer. Nurse Eileen's a very good free healer. Well, gotcha technically, but 4-star healer. And free to Trials of the Mighty through, etc., etc. So anyway, let's talk about Sandalphon now. I think Sandalphon bridges what makes both of those adventures good, and then just does even more. So to me, she looks like clearly the best water healer at a glance. It doesn't mean that Eileen's going to become obsolete, or even Lily, but I think that Sandalphon here just brings so much in her kit that it's worth talking about. So let's get into it. The basic way that she works, we'll start with her ability this time to kind of set the context. Heavenly Wings 2. First of all, she has a unique transformation, so she can unleash a Heavenly Wings mode, and because of this ability, her Dragon Gauge is replaced with a unique Shapeshift Gauge. You can tap it when it's at a certain threshold or above to let her shapeshift, and that lets her unleash her special mode, and she's always going to transform into it regardless of who she's equipped with, and you can tap it again when you're transformed to go back. So it's kind of like Tiki or Not, where you can exit the mode if you want to, or any of the Dragon Drive characters really. But interestingly here at the end, it does say while shapeshifted, her basic attacks fill the shapeshift gauge. So that's going to give her an ability to sustain herself and stay in that mode, which not all Dragon Drive adventurers do. So that's something kind of cool about her. So reading on, this is the other thing that's essential to understand her kit. She has a skill reservoir with 3 levels. It's filled when using standard attacks, when 4 strikes connect, or by other conditions that fill skill gauges. So instead of charging up her skills normally like most other adventurers, she's like a handful that have this special skill reservoir where you can have up to 3 charges and you spend those charges to use your skills. What this lets you do essentially is stockpile skill charges to use rapidly one after another. So it's a pretty powerful enhancement on a healer in particular, because there are going to be times when you want to heal rapidly and frequently, and there may be lots of times in the fight for healers where everybody's at full health. You don't need to spend your healing skills really, but you're already fully charged, so what are you going to do? Having a skill reservoir is a really nice workaround for that conundrum as a healer. And then in addition, at the start of quests, she's going to have these 2 different styles. So this is kind of like Regina had. She has Coordination Protocol and Concentration Protocol. You can charge a Flurry Strike for 1.5 seconds to cycle between them. And let's see here. Using the user's first or second skills, including when shapeshifted, grants her a defense amp with the maximum team amp level of 3. After this amp is granted, the ability will not grant it again for 20 seconds, so if you can space out your skills with your skill reservoir to use them every 20 seconds, all the better. You can build up amps that way. And the max level of 3, combined with Regina, who can also spam defense amps, I could see this being a very potent auto combination. That's a very significant defense buff if you get it to team level 3, so I think that's also kind of cool here. And of course, amps immune to Curse of Nihility, Sinister Dominion. Okay, so Stun Res 100%, and then Combat Coordinator 2. Stun Res is not really anything super remarkable. Might actually be better on a healer than Burn Res. For DPS, I'd prefer Burn Res because you can easily get Stun Res these days with a 20% skill damage Wormprint, Tutelari's Destiny, plus the Emissaries of the Heavens 20% Flurry Strength Wormprint. So DPS can easily get Stun Res even if they start with Burn Res. But healers, it's actually, you don't want skill damage, you don't want strength usually. So for a healer in particular, having Stun Res might actually be better because you can patch in Burn Res with like Beach Battle, probably some other prints that are totally fine. Since your print slots on healers are generally not as competitive, there are good ones you want to run for buff time, skill haste, etc. But we have a lot of affinity reducing worm prints in the Sinister Dominion slots nowadays to kind of make that easier. So anyway, that seems like a fine passive. Affliction resistance, and then Combat Coordinator. Her unique shapeshift gauge is partially filled when her HP is restored. After activating, it won't activate again for 10 seconds. Cool. Yet another way to charge up the unique shapeshift gauge. And let's see if we've missed anything here. I think that covers a lot of the abilities. Okay, so let's move up. Co-abilities, Recovery Potency plus 20%, standard on staffs, and then Vengeful Shield 5. If a teammate or her would get afflicted, they get a one-use shield that nullifies damage up to 25% of their maximum HP. It doesn't nullify the affliction or cancel it, they just get the shield after they get afflicted, and then it won't activate again for 20 seconds. Seems fine. It points to, and other things in her kit are going to point to, Surtur may have real affliction-related mechanics, or this could just be a way to thematically tie Regina and Sandalphon based around afflictions, who knows. But to me, it seems like maybe a hint about Surtur. So now let's actually read through the skills. Angelic Praise is her first skill. It's shareable with a share cost of 6, and this consumes 1 level of the skill reservoir. It restores HP to all teammates and continues gradually healing over time, so you get regen. Regen is immune to Nihility when it comes from skills. And it activates additional effects based on which buff you have. So if you're in the Coordination Protocol, it grants overdamage to the entire team. Fantastic, wonderful, it's great in Nihility, it's great for hit count based mechanics, meaning in particular, Legend Twins, there's hit count mechanics that overdamage is super helpful against, whether you're doing solo or co-op, so that is actually very big there. And then Concentration Protocol grants the user the Rapid Analysis effect. So we'll read more on what that does slowly, but if you use the skill while shapeshifted, instead it's called Celestial Skewer. It deals damage to surrounding enemies, and if the user has Rapid Analysis, it consumes 1 Rapid Analysis stack. then restores HP to all teammates and immediately readies the skill for use. So Rapid Analysis can let you use the skill multiple times rapidly, as it were. It's going to heal all teammates in addition to dealing damage as well. So interesting kit here. You can see the parameters. The overdamage is 40%, which is potent. It's more potent than what we saw in Basileus, but similar to Dragalia Lily with 40% of her strength as well. And then the regen, recovery potency seems fine. And then the damage also seems pretty fine too. Okay, so reading on, Angelic Wings consumes 1 level of the user's skill reservoir, restores HP to all teammates, and activates additional effects based on which of the following buffs the user has. So this one is just a one-shot heal, it's not regen, but you do get additional effects, and those are, with the Coordination Protocol, it removes all afflictions from the entire team and increases the max HP of adventurers from whom afflictions have been removed. So that is really interesting. I don't think we've ever had a universal affliction cleanse so far in the game. There's not any that I can think of. Maybe I'm missing an ability or something like that. Valentine's Chelsea's ability, perhaps. I think that's just affliction resistance universally. I don't think we've actually had this type of cleanse before. So the ability to heal, to remove, I should say, any affliction is actually kind of sweet. It's not shareable, of course. This isn't her shareable skill. But in particular, there are some afflictions, the New Age afflictions, that we don't have good resistances to. So Scorch Rend, if that is a big deal in Surtur, this is a way to cleanse that on your entire team. And when you do so, you get a max HP buff to boot. And not just a max HP buff, you get an HP plus 30%. That's the full buff that you can get for max HP. That's a very big chunk of extra max HP to get at once. So I'm kind of surprised they went that far with it, but again, that only works if you actually cleanse the affliction off of somebody. But Scorch Rend is a big one that right now nobody can heal. Otherwise, against flame enemies, you're usually going to get burnt or stunned. With Scorch Rend in particular, technically the Legend Twins, the Legend Agito fight against the Twins, they can cause Scorch Rend, but it only happens, I believe, if you haven't been effective at dispelling them with one of their Hagurama buffs. If it's left on, then their burn moves become Scorch Rend moves instead. So if you're dispelling them proactively, you're not going to see Scorch Rend too often. It might also happen in the Berserk phase. It's been a while since I've actually experienced it, though. Usually I end up getting stunned in the Berserk phase instead. But in principle, Scorch Rend could be a big deal in Surtur. And so I think the heal of the whole team there with the huge max HP buff that could be relevant for auto is really nice. And then for her second effect here, if you have Concentration Protocol active, it just partially fills the user's unique shapeshift gauge. So if you don't have anybody on your team to cleanse the afflictions of, you can just always get some extra shapeshift gauge instead. If this is used while shapeshifted, it's going to be called Celestial Castling, and it deals damage to surrounding enemies, inflicts frostbite, and one of the following: poison, burn, paralysis, stormlash, flash burn, shadow blight, or scorch rend. Bit of a tongue twister there. And if you have rapid analysis, it consumes one of the stacks, restores HP to all teammates, and immediately readies a skill for use. So again, I'm going to allow you to use it rapid fire style. So very cool. So it seems like really with the skill reservoir, you're going to be able to use that mostly in combination with rapid analysis and the shapeshifted form. That's my interpretation at least of this. Because you still have a skill energy required on the base skills. So I could be off. I don't have Feeny, the other skill reservoir character I can think of. So I may not be as familiar with this playstyle, but in principle, I think you can use this to potentially spam some of these skills. So anyway, as we read on, you get the information about the different afflictions. I don't think the causing multiple afflictions thing is really relevant for current content, but that is something that, who knows, could be relevant against Surtur. And I think that is pretty much it for Sandalphon's kit. It's mostly just the combination of effects that she has. Having regen, overdamage, max HP buffs, cleansing all afflictions. It's a very good combination of different effects, so that's why I think that she might be the best water healer. She also has offensive capabilities when you go into your Heavenly Wings form. these combination of effects, she has the defense amps. These combination of effects are currently spread out across a lot of different healers. Jiangxia if you want to cleanse burn, or one of the other lower rarity healers. If you want overdamage, that's got to be Dragalia Lily. If you want max HP buffs, it's Lily or Nurse Eileen. If you want amps, it's Nurse Eileen. Granted, hers are strength amps and Sandalphon's are defense amps. But yeah, all the current healers kind of only do one or a few of the above. This is an adventure to me that seems like she does all of the above, so I'm very excited to see how she plays out. It's been a while since we've gotten a new healer that is this exciting, I think. So anyway, y'all, that is pretty much going to do it for today. I'm not going to get into too much detail on Gala Ellie's kit. The one written here is her level 80 kit instead of her Trials of the Mighty version. Things to note, she's a solid adventure. She's fine against Legend Twins, but the hit count mechanics are a weakness of hers. They did change her first skill so that half of it works against Curse of Nihility. Instead of 30% strength, you get 15% in HP regen. And to her second skill, they also upgraded it so you get a strength amp with a max amp level of 3. So she's a solid adventurer, and certainly one that had a lot of use against Brunhilde, made life a lot easier there. But in the Twins, even through the Legend difficulty, I think she's fine, but not like essential. Very comfortable to use, and maybe she'll be better against Surtur. Who knows, it remains to be seen. But once again, y'all, I think that is pretty much all I have to say. This ended up being a super long video. I guess I had a lot to talk about on these adventures. Hopefully, if you were just wondering about whether or not to summon, you got your answer in the first 5 or 6 minutes. And if you wanted the longer form content, now that I am doing some shorter 1-minute reviews, hopefully this gives you your dose of the longer form content that you're craving. That is going to really do it for today, though, everyone. Let me know what you think about these adventures in the comments below. Thank you as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.